Testing, testing. Alright, your maintenance structure, main generator, the D12. The maintenance instruction 4320 revision C, main generator type D12, application F3, F7, BL2, BL2, GP7, SD7, MRS. General description: the type of the D12 main generator figures 1 and 2 with directly connected with the diesel engine crankshaft throughout the alternator, rotor, spider, flexible cupping. Generator produced with a nominal 600 volts direct current for supplying power to the traction motor itself. The underlying double cylindrical roller bearing is in the communicator end housing carriers. The wave of the communicator end of the generator armature. The other end of the armature is supported by the engine crankshaft rear main bearing. The generator is force ventilated with the impeller mounted on the end of the auxiliary generator shaft. This revision supersedes all previous additions. The paragraphs marked with the asterisk have been changed from previous publications, and it shows a picture of the figure 1 generator alternator assembly. Generator field. The generator contains 6 types of fields as follows. Starting with the starting field is used only while the engine is being started with the current. For the starting field is supplied with the storage batteries. Differential. The differential field is wound with that. So the differentials of the shunt with the battery field with the differential field is connected in series with the armature and purpose to maintain the constant kilowatt output. The shunt field connected with the parallel armature with excited by the armature with the main generator with the current excitation with the shunt field is only a small portion of the total available load current battery. The battery field is separately excited field and is connected to the battery auxiliary generator circuit with the battery field is done with the control of the load regulator which serves to maintain constant horsepower demand on the engine for an ampere depending on the capacity of the generator. Interpoles. The interpoles are communicating poles are connected in series with the armature and are excited with a load current within which turns with the magnetic field in such for the directions as if the reversal of the current with the armature coil undergoing commutation. The function of these fields will bring about better commutation. Compensating copper conducts are placed within the slot with the main pole face with approximately parallel to the armature conductors connected in series with the armature circuit. The purpose of this is the field is to reduce the armature reaction upon the main field to bring about the better operating conditions. Figure 2 shows the application of the CE cover. Armature, screwed cork design, improve voltage, wave form, increase generator efficiency, maintenance. Electrical insulation gradually deteriorates, weakens under the normal surface of the heat of the dirt, moisture aids the rate of which insulation deteriorates, to therefore depend on the surface of care which is subject. The total use of the life is increased by keeping the insulation clean and protecting it from moisture. Insulation can also be rejuvenated or some original life with the restore periodically overhaul, thorough clean, and vacuum impregnation. This process also protects the insulation with the deterioration effect of the dirt and moisture. Since the life of the insulation depends upon the above factor, the length of the time between the overhauls will depend on the factors not controlled by the manufacturer. However, the electric motor division recommended the generators overhaul with approved material with proper processing as often outlined in scheduled maintenance program. If proper equipment for the maintenance of the overhaul is not available, the generator should be returned to the electric motor division whenever either becomes necessary. Cleaning. It is essential for the generator to be kept clean at all times. The generator should be blown out with a clean, dry, compressed air whenever the conditions warrant and periods are outlined in their scheduled maintenance program. The generator must not be sprayed with a liquid. Any kind of the attempt of the cleaning with the coil of the windings of the liquid container will destroy the protective garnish, causing it to peel or crack. Although necessary to blow out the dirt and dust, with clean, dry, compressed air, they often enough to prevent the accumulation of large volume. The reasonably with low pressure should be used. High pressure for a nozzle, if used, the dangerous loosening of the binding tape, the cutting of the protective coating with the various parts. In case where there are heavy deposits of grease dirt with which cannot be removed with air or dry cloth with a stiff brush, sudden wash, wooden or fiber scrapers may be required. Severe cases may be necessary to dampen the cloth with a solvent type of the cleaner to remove the oxide, grease, and oil. However, every precaution should be taken with the cleaning of the cleaner. All of the communicator copper parts of this type of cleaner should be used only when other methods will not remove the foreign material. Inspection. The generator should be inspected often enough to prevent failure with the service. This should include the examination item of the details which appear under the respective headings of the maintenance instruction. For the general condition of the equipment may be determined by the observing the communicator of the generator armature may be assumed to be left to be the heart of the generator assembly through which the flow of the load over the current of distribution, traction motor, lubrication. The main generator bearing is a double cylindrical sealing aligning foot roller bearing lubricated with the medium of the grease of which is secured with the front of the bearing cover. Acts as the lubricating pipe and is made with the removing the cover of the alternator collector rings, Lubrico M6 and or the Regal Starvac number 2, and it's approved with the regular lubrication. Once of the 1 ounce of grease should be added to the period specified in scheduled maintenance program. The grease fitting should be examined regularly to see if there is not damage of allowing the dirt to enter the bearing of the bearing. 4. The grease on the fitting should be wiped clean so that not to force of the dirt within the bearing with the grease. The NLGY3 grease is approved with the sealing of labyrinth grooves in the bearing cover and cap at the overall and any time the cap is removed. Brush holders and brushes. The periodic inspection of the brushes and brush holders should be made with the following period points observed. Brushes should move freely and when the holder is not stuck with the dirt or other form or substance with the release of the spring from the anchor pin, and raise and lower the brushes into the carbon waves so that the releasing of the dirt may have been accumulated. Care should be taken not to snap the spring as in the damage of the spring and chip the brush. Replace the brush as have been chipped with excessive of the brush. Recommend the lubricating manufacturer for the maintenance tab. This recommendation should be followed with only a partial replacement is made with two different kinds of the brushes. The same generator may be detrimental in successful operation. The new brushes are installed and should be fitted with a communicator sandpaper. Use 00 grade sandpaper sanding in brushes. Sand brushes preferably with the directional rotation. Figure 3. While insulation brush is riveted with the shunt of the brush, shuns should be braided in order to reduce stiffness in the shunts. Insulation brushes for the Q-tamped shunts, tamped shunts of the brushes next to the riser should be twisted, complete turn braided to prevent either their striking of the riser. The other brushes should be left untwisted and unbraided. Caution care must be exercised with the braided shunts and not to induce the grate of the degree of the stiffness, thus hinder the brush movement of the whole of the brush or staggered in factory relative to the position should be maintained to prevent grooving with the communicator of staggered pairs on the end of the brushes. Into the 2 adjacent brush holders should be aligned but should be outlined with the next pair of brush holders. Figure 3 shows sanding in the brushes, the exert, the pressure, and the pull on the 00 grade paper. Figure 4 shows the measuring the brush tension. Alright, the proper brush should be maintained with the specified with the maintenance data. It's important that all of the brushes adjust with the same pressure. Unequal brush pressure causes unequal current distribution in the brush's pressure. Measuring spring tension with the lever, arm 1/8 of an inch above the top of the brush holder and box. Refer to Figure 4 for the method of the measuring brush pressure. Brush holder spring may lose some of the tension during the first weeks of the operation. Aging the spring with the spring should be checked occasionally during the period of tension. Reset with the necessary. After one adjustment, they should be retained with the tension. Figure 5 shows the complete brush holder assembly. Spring tension on the brush holder is regulated in the following manner. 1. Remove the springs with the anchor. Remove the brushes for the brush holder to be adjusted. Remove the cap screw. Remove the cap screw holding the clip. Remove the clip. 4. Remove the anchor assembly with the desired slot, usually second and third slot. Install the clip and screw with the cap screw. 4. Insert the spring in the anchor pin. 5. When checking spring tension, it is important to relieve the tension, if any, between the spring turn with the bushing to relieve the friction. Shake anchor with the assembly sideways. Keep porcelain insulators on the brush holder assembly clean. Do not let oil or dirt accumulate on the brush holders. With the brush holder, wipe the brush holders with a clean and dry cloth. Replace with the broken crack, removing the placing with a defective brush holder, the region with removing the complete brush holder assembly and replacement. And it shows Figure 5 shows the brush holder assembly. Replacement with a spare one, and is this one with a porcelain insulator is replaced with the must be cemented and baked, which takes time. When replacing porcelain insulator should be the snug fit over the bush brush holder stop and then insulate with the accomplish for the cut over the piece of the empire tape and adjust to give the porcelain snug fit over the tape over the remove of the insulator with applying baking varnish on the tape inside of the porcelain. Fill around with the top of the porcelain with the brush holder cement. Make the cement with the following instruction materials required: 41% clean black baking varnish by weight and 59% luminous tail by weight. Preparation: mix clear baking varnish with Losmic talc and consistently into a putty. Application: immediately with the bake in the oven at 115 degrees Celsius for 4 hours. After the baking, paint cement with red air drying enamel. Ground test the brush holder after the baking before storing and replace the generator at 5,000 volts. Maintain the tolerance of 1/8 of an inch plus 1 plus 1 minus 16th of an inch to 0 clearance between the bottom of the brush holder communicator. Brush rigging is arranged in such a way that the brush holder may be removed with the tool of the communicator surface of the communicator wears or turn with the S over the maintain 1/8 of an inch plus 1/16 of an inch to 0 clearance between the face of the brush holder. The communicator brush holder should be kept regularly placed and bolted in place. Refer to Figure 6. Figure 6 shows the adjusting spring tension given in 4 to 4.5 pounds at brush. Shows the brush holder clearance 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch clearance. After cleaning with the necessary hinge of the generator, end housing may be painted with a coated red air drying enamel to remove the lever and shaft assembly of the brush holder with a free spring with anchor pins. 2. Remove the bolt shaft assembly, remove the shaft of the lever assembly from the brush holder. 3. Snap with the rings, pilers, remove the snap ring washer. Individually assemble that may be slipped off with the shaft with the reassembly, lever and shaft assembly to the brush holder. Assemble the anchor and pin assembly with the lever shut assembly, spring with the bushing, assemble the bushing to the shaft. 5. Such assembly with the constitute one brush holder, lever and shaft. The assembly with the lav. The assembly is placed on the shaft. The assembly washer to the shaft and apply snap ring to the shaft. Using the spring installation tool, note, use the new snap ring desired old ring when installing complete lever to shaft assembly. Use the U-shaped tool shown in Figure 7 and the A of the installation assembly with the brush holder. 3. Apply with the clips and hold anchor assembly with the brush holder net spring tension with the previously outlined. 4. Care must be taken when the brush holders are removed and replaced with the cutting of the lock washer to the not fall with the communicator to come with the loss of moment of the other brushes over the brushes. Figure 8 show the end bell with the brush holder assembly. Armature of the armature should be closely inspected with condition bands, wedges, coils, insulation, general assembly, and commutator. Armature bands of the core wedges should be tight and secure. Soldering shows the Figure 7 shows the insulating lever and shaft assembly. Figure 8 shows the end bell brush holder assembly on the band that should intact with the solder has been thrown in. The case should be determined and corrected band with the replace the use of the proper facility with the banding available. The generator should be returned to the electric motor division. Coil insulation should be cleaned with free of blister flakes, cracks, other insulating varnish serve the condition of the insulation varnish of the armature is such that the treatment necessary for the proper facility with a vacuum impregnation are not available to return the generator electric motor division. If solder has been thrown out with the communicator riser over the armature should be rebound with the new coils. Polishing of the communicator surface of the communicator should be present in even and smooth appearance. Free from pitting and under normal conditions. Split type of the brush with the clean with the communicator with the clean stone should not be necessary. Communicators have killing with the grayish black film, which may result in the burning of the communicator bar with clean with improved with the hand stone. Number 8149435 designed to remove the undesired dirt grease if it does not affect with the face of the brush or the communicator with a clean action with the race of the grindstone that can be used to remove the slight imperfections. Should the strip of the communicator be edged with the burn to the extent with the need of the resurfacing that should be done with a sanding or grinding fixture with the grinding of the communicator in the vent with the communicator with the burn with the pit with the extent with the above procedures is not clean with the grinding and it will be necessary following the suggested procedure with the file with the grinding of the communicator with the grinding fixture. If a new set of brushes is to be installed with the after grinding, remove all of the brush extend with the 2 adjacent sets with the starting with the engine. 2 sets can be left while the grinding move providing with the new brushes are to be installed with the after the grinding. The next step is to remove the brush holder. It suggests that the first holder belt with the horizontal plane with the generator on the left side looking for the communicator and be removed. And then the grinding fixture is made up of 2 parts of the supporter adapter grinder proper. The grinder is on the supporting adapter installed with the unit with the plate for the brush holder securely clamped in plate with the brush holder and blocks as Figure 9 shows the communicator grinding fixtures, the grinder and supporter aid, and Figure 10 shows the lining of the grinding fixtures. Shown in Figure 9, square with the grinder up with the communicator as near as possible so that the cross read run parallel with the communicator bar. Finally, check with the mount with the indicator with the grinder and the check with the parallel should be shown in 1/1000th of an inch, shown in Figure 10. Next, mount the stones be sure with the sealed squarely on the communicator with the radial with the feed with the pull stone with the wave from the communicator starting engine run at idle speed with the grinding feed stone with the communicator slowly until the light contact is made with the run stone with the communicator finish with the run stones across with the communicator several times without feeding radially. After grinding communicator, generator should be cleaned thoroughly with the first wipe with all the loose copper off with the inside of the generator so with the minimum of the copper be blown into the winding of the next blow of the generator or thoroughly special attention must be made with the complete removal of the copper communicator slots. This could be best be done with the running of the engine, directing the air hose of the face of the communicator. Any copper remaining slots either and the in the form of the dust or slivers will result in a flash over the shot. Slots between the communicator bars should be cleaned out whenever the examination shows the bright mica is not visible. To clean even the hacksaw blade with it has been made had a set of teeth grounded off. This has been proper thickness. Generators badly worn, burning with the generator should be removed with the return to the electric motor division for service. No. Emery cloth or emery paper should never be used on the communicator as necessary for any lubricant when the communicator is therefore sufficient about with a graphite with a brush and supply all lubricating required. Turning of the communicator, if the communicator is damaged to such extent with the grinding, the communicator is not effective. The armature should be played with a lath. The communicator turned with just enough to give it a uniform surface. For turning the communicator, suitable covering should be played with one over the end of the winding, prevent the tip of the working of the armature for the light machine cut. Speed armature should be 181 RPMs to 615 or 1600 and 54 feet per minute with the carboil type lath cutting tool. When making light cut finishes for the grindstone with a run off the ends of the communicator segment at least 1/16 of an inch radius of the fine mill file. Communicator wear limit the diameter type D12 generator communicator design with a valve with a 3/8 of an inch radius with a give it the minimum diameter of 34 and a half. 34 and a quarter as condemning limit of the communicator has been subjected to mischief that might become roughly as approached with the condemning limit of the full amount of the wear might not be obtained. Neck width, where we work in the communicator with the communicator's clean with the light machine turned out with a turn cut. When this operation is repeated with a number of times, the minimum neck width allowable to 3/4 inch neck diameter. The minimum diameter of the cleaning the outside diameter of the communicator neck is limited by the location of the top edge armature coil. The communicator neck diameter should be machine below the point. Undercutting the communicator after the communicator has been turned with the grounding of the fine stone with the after check of the communicator surface. The surface is found to be in good condition. Mica should be undercut to a depth of 3/64 of an inch to 5/64 of an inch and a width of 31,000 of an inch of the undercutting the width of the mica of 31,000 inch undercut of the number 8085255 should be used. The burr communicator ham and the scraper to undercutting the remove the sharp edge of the communicator bar with the burning of the communicator applied with the crocus cloth lightly around the communicator remove with all the mica with the copper cutting and with the dry compressed air. Overhauling of the communicator, the duty performed with the communicator head with the loaded generator railroad surface varying exacting calls of the communicator with a definite design as well as highly accurate workmanship at assembling which is done in a special air conditioned room. After the communicator has been assembled, there has been a definite period of seasoning that require very close attention as well with many hours actual time prepare of service. All of the work requires special machine with the customer. Customer would not be warranted of buying with a few communicator that might have with a rebuild. Therefore, as other recommendation for the armature to be sent to our plant if the communicators have the damage to the extent that they must be rebuilt. In addition, the work of the equipment required for the rebuild of the communicator is also necessary. The core be properly balanced. After the communicator has been rebuilt, such repairs should be handled with the repairs and return basis. Creepage surface with the proper care with the creepage surface of the armature extremely necessary to prevent flash over the surface marked with the X in figure 11 or to be painted with the flint flex red 1530895 insulating paint whenever the inspection reveals is needed. The recommended procedures follow: sandpaper the surface marked with X and A and from the X and Y to width of double zero grade sandpaper. The sander smooth, applying light pressure when sanding over communicator string band. 2. Clean surfaces early with the alcohol. Figure 11 show the care of the creepage surface of the X and Y, X, Y, X, and A commutator. Caution not paint over carbonized with insulation painting. Varnish of the insulation have been carbonized from the flash over overload surface of creepage through unclean insulation moisture with the improper use of the high pot machine. Generator should be removed with the proper repairs and cannot be made with the locomotive. Do not run a generator while paint is wet. The paint should air dry with approximately 1 hour. Applying with the paint on the proper consistency with the thin end of the coat, possibly working with a paintbrush considerably so the paint will be evenly applied, leaving no dabs or overlapping marks. 4. Extra care must be taken. See that no paint gets into the communicator slot with the relief of the bottom of the communicator neck or the surface marked with the A figure 11. This trouble will be experienced if the care is taken applying with the paint over the machine while running while the paint is wet. 5. An earlier maintenance instruction rate communicator paint is recommended. Sterling's S345 and the Exile thinner is not recommended. Flint Flex Red 1530895 and may be used because of the faster drying property. All stock Sterling S 345 may be either depleted with no thinner with the Flintex necessary with the container covered with tight. Keep tight with the application brush. Use clean and free old paint. Generator field pole assembly. Make visual inspection condition installation from the main pole with the inner pole shower over the damage of the installation over the unusual condition. Overheating of the field coils may result. Partial short circuit and a short in one of the field coils. To remove the field pole with the inner pole, generator will have to be uncoupled with the engine of the complete generator of the alternator assembly. Remove the unit and place on the shop floor. Raise the assembly off the shop floor with the blocking with a generator mounting plate with before assembly with the before removing the field pole with the tailor assembly, obtain with the measurement with the inside micrometer from the pole with the face of the pole to remove the diameter diametrically out opposite of the pole face with the core with the measurement, obtain with the pole space with the measurement between the side of the main pole core side and with adjacent inner pole cores and record the measurement with the measurement will be made aid to obtain the alignment of the pole with reinstalled with the new poles with them remove the excessive varnish of the point with the removed measurement. Field poles, inner poles should be removed with the complete assembly with the defective assembly. Return with the electric motor division for a salvage value. Main pole and inner pole assemblies are only serviced as complete units. Replacing field poles, line up with the pole washer spring assembly before the tightening of the pole bolts for assembly. All inner poles shimmed in the proper place that is originally found. It is also important with the generator pole space in the line with the reassembling with the four soldering connector for the trap with the cable connections as follows. The pole space between the side of the inner pole core of the adjacent side of the main pole core is shown with a nominal space of 1/27th of the 64th of an inch. For the total variation between these spacings should not exceed 50,000 of an inch. Inner pole with the air gap of any one of the machine live plus for the minus 10,000 of an inch average inner pole air gap of the machine. 3. The spacing center line, one pane pole with the center line with adjacent main pole should not vary with the nominal center line be more than 1/132 of an inch. A cable connector joins to the inner pole compensating field with the connector solder with the high temperature solder at 843.99. Compensating field connector solder with the solder 844.02. Shunt field leading connection solder with the 8107.86.8. Flux on knocker road soldering paste before soldering bracing all inner poles connectors just joints using brazing tongues. Silpho solders care should be taken to prevent soldering from running down. Field connectors performing any of the soldering operation. Figure 12 shows the generator field assembly. Insulation connection straps, cable lead with the coils should be examined to determine if they are electrically satisfactory, securely, mechanically insulate all field solder connections. 3 layers of Empire tape overlaid and 2 layers of friction tape. The extent of the field connection between coils 10 and 11 there, which are tapped. Figure 12 shows the generator field assembly. 3 layers of glass mica tape with the 2 layers of friction tape and insulated with the battery field with the connection. 3 layers with the Empire tape with half of the overlap with the 2 layers of white cotton webbing half the overlap with lasting by the law. Looping last term of the webbing over the preceding turn of the paint webbing with the red air drive enamel after the red enamel the drive of the paint. Black air drive varnish the start of the differential field with connectors are not insulated with the soldering joint paint with the black air drying varnish after soldering. Inner bolt connection with the frame of the insulated with the 3 layer with the Empire tape with the 2 layer with the friction tape all tapering half overlapped. A loose lead connector should be tied between with 1/16 of an inch torpedo twine and fish paper insulator tied with necessary with the paint with the black air dry varnish compensating field solders connection with non-insulated with the Empire friction tape. Burst spray with the pointed with the black air drying varnish from the fish paper space for the install between the compensating field connectors on the communicator end on the rear end of the stated with the connector in place with the 1/16 with the torpedo twine shown figure 13. Pole bolt holes should be asphalt compound removed should be cleaned with the repaint with the black air drying varnish before the refilling with the compound. All pole bolts above the horizontal center line are filled with the asphalt compound for any high potential testing. The maintenance instruction 2100 note grounding both sides of the battery field circuit with a high potting shield shunt field circuit. Ground both sides of the shunt field circuit with a high potting battery field circuit, and it showed the compensating field connection. Make a resistance test field with the inner pole of the Kelvin bridge as seen in wire diagram figure 14. Maintenance of the data with the value of the removal of the armature roller bearing assembly generator outside of a unit. Assuming that the following operation performed before the generator alternator assembly was removed with the locomotive. The fish paper the strips of 1/16 by 3 inch by 36 inch are played with the air gap between the armature of the field poles. the direct current generator only. No material was used with an air gap between the alternator, rotorator, and stator. 2. Of the brush were removed with the communicator collector ring with the communicator protected with a ring with a made of fish paper material. With the remove of the armature of the AC rotor from stator assembly. Mount the generator alternator assembly with the I-beam with a suitable with a height with a floor anchor shackle and brace the fixture with the lifting complete with the generator assembly. Remove the friction empire tape with the bolted connection. Remove bolts of the buses. Remove the cleats and shafts of the bolts with the communicator. Cover the assembly. Remove the generator with the negative starting field bus bar. Remove the conduity pipe and clamps bolted with the bottom communicator cover. Remove the collector ring, brush holder, cable, the terminal post with the compressor, gear guard assembly. Remove the guard assembly. Remove the communicator covers. Apply Aber fixture with the spider bore, alternator, rotor, and remove bolts for the end housing generator frame. And this shows the picture of the wire diagram with a differential start battery and shunt compensation. And then the 12 S's, and then the battery field positive negative, ground positive, shunt positive and negative. And then show the ground positive of the motor to compensating differential interpole battery field, and then the shunt between the differential and compensating interpole start and ground negative, and S is the start. So apply 2 wire cable place with the one looping around with the armature fixture, the other looping around with the compressor coupling with the gear. The 8 of the crane raised back end of the space of the rotor air gap, the stator frame with the air, and the second of the crane with the cable to the front end of the air around the compressor coupling gear should be raised until the taut. Insert of the 3 jack bolts, 3/4 inch, number 10 NC class 3 threaded tapered hole. Provide with the end housing, free housing from a generator frame. Ease the armature alternator rotor out of the frame. 12 of the communicator end of the care must be exercised not to injure the laminations or windings. Do not allow the armature to rub within the pole piece being removed. Rest of the armature with the armature cradle. The cradle should be high enough from the floor to clear the bus connection with the end of the housing. Remove the bolts and gear seal plate with the compressor gear. Remove the gear. Remove the collector ring and cable with the terminal post. Remove the bolt hole with the flange to the generator shaft. Remove the flange. Apply the studs. Add 2 1/2 inch of the 13 NC class 2 tape bolt holes to the studs should be long enough to allow the pulling plate with the hydraulic puller to remove the coupling gear something from the shaft. Remove the collector ring with a brush holder from the stud of the compressor and the bearing cover to apply with the studs. 7/16 with the 20 NF class 3 taped hole. Remove the sleeve of the shaft. Remove the bolts of bearing cover. Remove the cover and bearing housing and make be slipped off of the bearing outer brace. Remove the remainder of the bearing assembly. Apply 8 studs over the sufficient length with the 1/2 20 NF. Class 3 spline nuts to be impressed into the bearing cover, and when at the aid of the pulling plate with a hydraulic puller, remove the inner and outer oil ring, roller bearing, and bearing cap. All 8 studs are to be used. The studs applied with the bearing cap. There's their possibility with the breaking of the cap. When the less studs are used with the removal of the alternator stator with the main generator stator with the removal of the alternator rotator generator spider, refer to maintenance instruction 430. Armature bearing inspection roller bearing should be thoroughly inspected to provide impossible evidence of impending failure. If there's evidence of the bearing show that the sign of the distress, it should be replaced with a new bearing. Following procedures may be helpful in inspection bearing cleaning. For attempting to make any inspection bearing must be thoroughly cleaned and make sure 50% carbon tetrachloride, 50% benzene had been suitable for this purpose. After the inspection bearing should be dipped in hot oil to prevent corrosion and left the air is to be used immediately with a good or gray with the bearing oil should be used or grease that is used with lubricating and conservative wear. A properly lubricated bearing does bearing not subject to misalignment or distortion will show no evidence of wear. Internal radial clearance of the bearing may be checked with the passing of a feeler gauge between the rollers and face. On the unloaded side, do not roll the feeler through the bearing for limits of the maintenance data. Failure fatigues on the bearing show for the evidence usually after failure of the materials have stated the start of the actual failure must always start on the strip of the visual evidence. Only after the progress along the strip of the final failure of the material are usually evident as rag center and maybe any of the bearings showing the side of the cracks, graters, any side of regardless of how small they may be, shall be replayed with the type of the failure with more likely to occur with either the rollers or inner racer. Denser cover the hard particles form material being rolled between the racer of the rollers cover the slight with the depression where the bearing surface have been permanently deformed. They are distinguished from fatigue failure if they are a smooth surface with a slightly raised edge of the mount around the dent. Small dents themselves can cause little damage and usually evident with the bearings will have been run. However, the bearing should show signs of more of nominal distress should there be any question of whether there are dents or fatigue failures. Should there any question of their detrimental effect of the life of the bearing should be replaced. Scratches due to mishandling in such a general or not serious, providing they are small. Scratches may be recognized because they are bright in the bottom and the aft of the bearing clean. Scratches of the bearing should the parallel of the length of the bearing are more severe than those with the angle. Sometimes scratches with the difficult to differentiate within the crack of the region of the damage out with their characteristics should be treated with a crack for the fatigue failure. Heat any bearing shows evidence having the overheated should be replaced. Cages bearing shall not will show except for the wear of the cages should be replaced. Homing bearing housing when necessary for free up of the fit with the bearing. Honing should be used in the housing. Any side, inside of the outside micrometer should be used for the checking the bearing and the housing dimension. Armature bearing assembly. Before shrinking an armature bearing and shaft, the very important of the bearing to try with the housing before the assembly bearing housing. On the floor, try bearing with the bore of the housing. Care must be taken to see with the bearing enter with the housing bore with squarely, not cocked in any way. Outer race is tighted into this necessary with the housing bore with the home with a give it and push fit, having a clearance of the 2,000 to 3,000 of an inch. If a new armature bearing with a housing are to be applied, it may be necessary for the trouble with the home with the housing board obtaining the recommended 2,000 to 3,000 of an inch. Clearance between the housing board of the bearing race with the tolerance such for the bearing race where at the maximum allowable tolerance housing board was and the minimum allowable tolerance recommended for the clearance would not prevail. Bearing dimension tolerance out diameter 11.0236 plus or minus 14 10,000 of an inch bearings of 51181 10,000 of an inch width 3661 5,000 of an inch. Internal clearance 35 to 10,000 of an inch to 5,000 of an inch. Internal clearance 2,000 of an inch minimum. Bearing housing bore diameter 11.0244 plus or minus 1,000 of an inch. End play clearance 5/16 of an inch. To assemble the armature before assembling the shaft, the remove of the old grease of the bearing cap of the cover of the plane, the bearing cap and the cover will be painted with the crankcase orange enamel. The paint will allow the dry. Apply with the sealing grease for the groove of the bearing cap of the cover of the NLGL number 3 grease is approved with the C figure 15. 3 clean armature shaft. Remove the burrs of any of the all gall marks. Sealing grease of the grease level of the bearing cap. Cover the between 180 degrees. 1/4 inch button on 3/8 of an inch. Application of the grease and cap of the bearing. 4 fill of the bearing cap pocket with a proof with grease with the lubricant and the M6 of the star fact. Number 2 of the round with the lower with 180 degrees to end level indicated in figure 15. Pay for the cap of the position and shaft of the chome of the bearing assembly figure 16. Heat with the inner the oil throw over the oil bath the electrical oven in half of an hour at 248 degrees Fahrenheit or 120 degrees Celsius. Induction heater use the only heat up to 248 degrees Fahrenheit. 120 degrees Celsius for the oil bath. Use before heating. Remove the oil with the throw with the clean bound edge cloth prior to shrinking with the shaft of the wind. The use of the induction heat with the pyrometer reading with the current off should be thickened periodically. After the heating per instruction, the shrink and over the oil throw to be shaft of the figure 16. The proper position on the shaft left the oil thrower coal of the room temperature. Note the inductor heater is used with the heat bearing assembly part of the overheating may result with the warping and allergic upsetting of the parts. 6 fill of the bearing improved with the groove of the outer race may be removed with any position pack with the bearing rollers space with the between them 2 group of the rollers complete with the grace. Sheet 7. The heat the roller bearing with the induction heater with the 248 degrees or 120 degrees Celsius. The pyrometer readings with the current off the outside face of the inner race only. Also see note step 5 of the shrinking the bearing shaft of the bearing part number. Toward the outside, do not cover the bearing with a place onto the shaft. Use the brass pipe that pushes the bearings on the shaft up to against the inner oil throw with the lead bearing cool with the room temperature. Check 8. Check for the run out of the bearing inner race. Run out should be within 2,000 of an inch of the total in reading. Apply 2 studs 8, 1, 5, 9, 2, 2, 6, 180 degrees apart with 1/2 by 20 NF3 threaded spine nut with the press place in. Bearing cap purpose for the stuff of the guide with the bearing housing of the bearing cap to be applied with the gasket or apply with the housing. Sure to apply with the new gasket of the bearing cap. The gaskets must be lined with a clear bolt hole, maybe to the help with the plate for the flying spot grease, such as the NLGI1 GI number 3 with a gasket with a 10. The heater outer oil thrower in the opening of the bath electronic oven at half an hour of 248 degrees at 120 degrees Celsius. The induction heater is used with a heat of 248 degrees Fahrenheit, 120 degrees Celsius. The proceed with step 5 with the priority application of the end of the housing assembly over the roller bearing lining tool 8, number 8159227. It should be um, apply to the shaft of the hole of the bearing outer race stationary with this system and allowing the end housing overall or bearing to feel the grease pipe of the grease roof of the housing coil with the recommended grease applied with the end housing over the bearing aligning the housing drain with a cap drain. Fill the outer bearing cover with the pocket of the grease around the lower 180 degrees level indicated in the figure 15. Fill the lubricant with the tube with the grease applied with the cover applied with the new gasket with the housing, then the bolt with the bearing cover with the end of the housing lining, cover the drain hole with the grousing. Alright, and then figures 16 show the cross section of the D12, the generator. Yeah. And drain hole, remove the two stub of the U with the previously line, assembly part with the 12 on 13 heat armature for the sleeve with the inductor pin heat with the 260 degrees Fahrenheit, 127 degrees Celsius shrinking. The shaft, see figure 16 with the position of the shaft, 14 apply with the collector ring brush over the stub of the bearing, cover the rave with the brush over the clear rings before with the shrinking compressor, coupling gear, some of the shaft, figure 15, play with the coupling gear, some of the induction heat that expand, heat extend to 240 degrees Fahrenheit, 120 degrees Celsius, with taking the pyrometer, slip the ring, clean key with the way with the some of the key of the shaft, for shrinking with the gear, coupling in the assembly of the shaft, apply with the gear seal ring over the collector ring, you with the new valve seal, gasket with the ring, shrinking with the coupler gear with the assembly of the shaft with the forward position, feed figure 16. 16 fifth the cable of the alternator conduity with the bushing of the flange, both of the flange and shaft. 17 cover the cut cables in, scan allowed with enough to slack with the cable to clear bolt heads with the solder terminal low with the cable with the wrap at the time. Cables with the torpedo trying to assemble the terminal with the proper probe with the flat washer, lock washer, the nut with the paint cable, the red air draining enamel. See figure 17. Cover the communicator with the fish paper protection and applying end housing brush holder, assembly hearing of the housing, line up hole, end housing, assembly, bearing housing, one hole offset, bolts assembly together. A 19 cut and neck the drain pipe with the bearing cover the bolt with the pipe clamp and clamp to the end of the housing after the compressor. Coupling gear over the coupling gear assembly with the bolt with the gear seal plate. Figure 17 show the compressor coupling gear, the slip rings, and generator alternator assembly. 1. Bolt the alternator stator assembly to the generator stator frame. 2. Apply the split brush with the bolt solution from the brush to holder stand with the brush preferably the direction of the rotation with clean dry lint instead of the brown bound edge of the cloth with a clean carbon dust with the communicator ride with the string and the bands. 3. Apply the generator coupling disc to the alternator rotor flange. 4. Place the arbiter fixture in the flange of the bore of the alternator rotor spider. 5. These two wire cable loops are placed with one loop around the compressor coupling gear and the other loop around with the arbiter for the alternator rotor into the stator. Assembly guide with the rotor, assembly pipe, assembly slowly and carefully so that not to damage the coil insulation. 6. Bolt of the generator housing the frame be carried. Full to start with the dowel with the end housing of the first frame for the place of the fisher paper for the trips of 1/16 of the 3 inch by 36-inch air gap between the armature of the fuel pole. Do not apply any fish paper the other material with the air gap between the alternating rotor and the stator with the remove of the wire cable loop for the half of the fish paper has been applied. 8. Bolt with the starting field connector bus bar with the starting bus for the bolt with the generator negative bus bar. 2 with the generator negative bus. Bolt with the brush holders and the negative buff of the bus switch tab with the compensating the differential field connections after the bolting connection. Tight insulation with the 3 layer with the empire tape, 2 layers with the friction tape with the paint with the 1 coat with the black iron dried varnish. Note all bus bar connections are to be cleaned before bolting. Assemble the communicator end cover the bolt. Place the end cleats for the trap, the generator bus connection, insulating bus bar with the cleat of the traps of the red fiber insulation. 10. Apply with the compressor coupling guard. Assembly bolt in play with the connection collector ring brush hole with the cable, the terminal block with the guard assembly. Caution, connect the cable lead with the brush hole with the same polarity together with the same terminal with the post for the otherwise rotor field will short circuit and a direct short circuit placed on the auxiliary generator. High potential test, the preferred maintenance instruction 2100. Testing generator locomotive before the high potential test or maybe the high desirable to check first. The megameter, mega ohm meter, the mega ohm meter reading with the less of the 3 mega ohms should be viewed with the station individual circuit check. Find the location of low resistance, the accumulation of the dirt with the moisture sometimes sufficient, the cause of the leakage and the high potential.